So welcome everyone. Welcome to Firestorm. This is kind of like our condensed crash course version of Rainstorm, where we maybe value fun and silliness a little bit more than strict learning, but I'm sure you can take away something from tonight's classes. So we have a great lineup of 6 teachers, and we are going to be recording this session to be posted on YouTube. So that being said, it might be easier if you have any questions for any of our teachers to save them for the end. So without further ado, our first teacher on the lineup is Zoe, and she's going to be talking about cups. So take it away, Zoe.
Hello. Let me try the share screen again. Okay. Okay, and that Zoom magic is working again, right? Yes, awesome. Okay, so hi everyone. My name is Zoe. I'm calling in from LA today to talk about potentially something that could change your perspective of viewing ordinary things in your world. Maybe obviously using an aspect of philosophy. Yeah, so namely, it is my cup one thing, many things, or nothing? So feel free to type your answer in the chat now, your answer to this question right now, or as we go through my slides in the next 5 to 10 minutes, maybe your answer will change. Yeah, so what do you think? Is your cup one thing, many things, or nothing? Someone said absolutely nothing. Yeah, and okay, so let's consider a cup. And really, it can be any object around you right now. It can be your speaker, it can be your book, doesn't matter. But for the sake of having an example, let's say it's a cup. And since my cup is too intricate looking, we have a 2-dimensional cup on the slides here. And why don't we give it a name? Let's call it Chad. And let's also give him, they, some characters. So Chad is blue, Chad is made of clay, it's a ceramic cup, and Chad can hold water. Chad is like yay big and takes up some space, right? So then a super basic question, and not a trick question, what is Chad identical to? And I just gave away the answer. Yeah, so it might be obvious, but Chad is identical to Chad, right? And I want to talk a little bit about this relationship of identity. So when do you call 2 things or some things identical? Like what makes you say that some things are identical? Also not a trick question, super easy question. Yeah, they are the same. Yeah, so great answer. So we say that X is identical to Y when they are the same things, or sometimes we say, like, even when they're 2 things and they look the same, we say like, oh, it's identical to the other thing. Yeah, oh my gosh, so this person knows really well about numerical identity and qualitative identity. This is really a really good distinction. So if you have like identical twins, they're 2 people, right? But they have the same characteristics, and so we call them identical or same, but that would be a looser kind of identity in philosophy called qualitative identity, rather than numerical identity, which is actually saying there's one and only one thing. So I am identical to myself. There's only one thing. Chad is identical to Chad. That's also a numerical identity. So it's this one that we're talking about today. But philosophers took note of this and put it succinctly as laws. So let me just outline that real quick. So A and B are the same if A and B have the same properties. So Chad and Chad are both blue. Chad are made of the same clay. Chad exists at the same time. So this can apply to temporal and spatial characteristics as well. Chad exists at this point in space, taking up this much amount of space. Yeah, so philosophers call this the indiscernibility of identicals. If two objects are one and the same, then they all have the same properties. And identity of indiscernibles, if two things have all the same properties, they are the same things. Or no two distinct things exactly resemble each other. So even if you have identical twins, they are existing in different spaces, right? Taking up different amount of space. And they probably have other differences as well. So this last one, identity of indiscernibles, it's also called Leibniz's law after this dude. Yeah, so this will be important in thinking about how many things Chad really is. Yeah, so I want to pose a question. So it seems really reasonable to say that Chad is one thing because that's really all there is, right? There's no like cup ghost hiding anywhere, cup hologram, cup identical twin. It's just one cup. But I want to pose the question: what about the clay that Chad was made with? Because if Chad was made with clay, then when Chad was made into a form of a cup, was the clay destroyed? If not, then doesn't that mean that Chad is actually two things? Yeah, so the clay is a component of Chad. That's a good answer. Yeah, it transformed into Chad. Made of atoms is also a really good answer. Yeah, so let's see. So then, to people that are saying Chad is made of the clay, so clay isn't destroyed, but we also can't call them two distinct things. I want to ask this question. You can't really distinguish the blue clay or whatever clay from Chad once Chad was made into a cup, right? So if we go back to this Leibniz's law that says no two distinct things exactly resemble each other and that we can't discern identical things, and doesn't that mean that they are identical and therefore just one thing, right? Yeah. But let me outline this paradox a bit more clearly because using a timeline. So let's say we have a lump of clay at time t1. So over here we have a lump of clay, and then at t2, some sculptor transformed this clay into Chad. So at time t2, we have Chad. So I'm gonna write down some sentences, and you tell me if you agree with them or not in the chat. Yeah. So at t1, there is a lump of clay. Therefore, the lump of clay exists at time t1. All good? Yes, okay. At t2, cup is created, Chad is created with the lump of clay. Is this all good as well? Yeah, okay. So therefore, the cup or Chad exists at t2. Agree? Yeah, okay. Since the cup was created with the lump of clay was not destroyed at t2. People agree to this one? Someone says maybe. Okay, so then at t2, both the lump of clay and the cup exists. Do you agree to this one? Also, maybe we have a face. Why not? The concept of the singular lump of clay was destroyed. Interesting answer. Yeah, so this is where the paradox lies. So Ben says no more lump of clay, just cup. Yeah, so that's a controversial answer, right? We can't, so if Chad was made up of clay, how does making a sculpture destroy the material that it's made of? Yeah. Yeah, so no two distinct things exist at the same time in the same space, taking up the same amount as Chad, with the same properties. To make the paradox even more clear to you, if we can consider the characteristics of the lump of clay and Chad. So we saw that Chad it can hold water, it was blue, it's in the form of a cup, it exists at time t2 at this space. But the lump of clay is, maybe it's not blue, it exists from time t1 rather than t2, takes up this amount of space, but also if we extend this time further, and let's say at time t3 we do something physically, like put it back in the oven. I have no idea how ceramic works, but we can turn it back into a lump of clay or break it. Then we no longer have a cup, so Chad can't survive this change, but we still can say that the lump of clay exists. Does that make sense to everyone? Yeah, I'm also very glad that there's no one named Chad in this room. Yeah. Yeah, so this is a property or a characteristic that lump of clay and Chad don't share. So they seem to be distinct. So how can we say that this is just one thing and not two things? Yeah, and here's another good question. How much can I shave away from Chad before it stops being Chad? Will there be a point where the shavings become more Chad than Chad? Yeah, so this is a good question too. So like if I break the handle of this cup, is it still the same cup? If I break it enough so that it's just a pile of little ceramic pieces, then can we still call it Chad? But isn't it still a lump of clay? So if for those of you who answered that at T2 maybe lump of clay doesn't exist, then did it come into existence or go out of existence at T2 and then come back into existence when you smash the cup? That's hard to answer, right? Yeah. Okay. Yeah, so that is our paradox. There are several things you can do to go around this, but you need to make a decision, and this is where I'm going to end this. But you can first do this, and then you can decide to deny that at T1 or T2 lump of clay or Chad doesn't exist at all, commit to a sort of a nihilism and say that it's just some kind of fundamental units of reality, what they may be, but they are just organized in different ways at different times. That's one way you could go. You could say that Chad was never really created at T2, also kind of just organized atoms in a different way, but that would be it wouldn't align with our use of language, where we say often like, oh, the sculptor created a sculpture, or the cup was sculpted. I don't know. But it's also a good question whether language tracks metaphysical reality. So that's one option. You can also deny that the lump of clay really went out of existence at T2 when you made Chad. Also kind of odd. Yeah, or you could just go against the law of identity of indiscernibles and say that there can be things that exist at the same time in the same place with all the same qualities and characteristics taking up the same amount of space. There can be stuff like that, but I don't know what it could be. Yeah, but I will leave you to ponder about which sentence you would deny and how you would go about explaining that choice and the compensations that you would have to make to support that view. Maybe that would be another Rainstorm or Firestorm class, but that is all I got. Yeah. And that is my ending note.
Thank you, Zoe. So slight schedule switch. Next up, we're going to have Honorine talking about frozen frogs, which I guess we can also decide, are they one thing or more or less?
Thank you, thank you. I really liked your presentation, Zoe. That was fun to think about. I'm going to switch up the gears a little bit away from philosophy and into actually a mix of biology and chemistry with quite literally frozen frogs. So I'm calling in from Chicago, and any of y'all up here with me in the Northern Hemisphere are very aware that winter is right around the corner. And as humans, we're pretty adept at dealing with the cold by doing things like, bundling up in a lot of layers and furs, going inside into our heated apartments, drinking hot tea and all that jazz. But quite obviously, we're a huge exception in the animal kingdom with regards to how much control we have over our environment. So other animals can't exactly walk into their heated apartments to get away from the oncoming winter. And so there's a number of ways that a lot of animals have learned to deal with the cold from an evolutionary perspective. And the obvious one, of course, that people tend to think of first is hibernating bears. So you can just, fall asleep and preserve all your body fat, lower all your energy, and from there survive the cold. There's actually a primate known as a fat-tailed lemur that will hibernate in the Madagascar winter, although it's supposedly not to get away from the cold, it's to get away from the drought, but the principle remains the same. Amphibians and reptiles can do a similar form of this. It's not technically called hibernation because they're cold-blooded, but they go into a similar state of torpor where they will, in the case of water turtles, they'll bury into the ground, go into a rather dormant state. And for a number of water turtles, actually, they stop breathing through their lungs. They'll actually start breathing through specialized cells in their rear. So technically they breathe through their butts in the winter, which is pretty funny. Or you could do like the geese and the monarchs, and you can just fly away from the cold and be fine because you're not dealing with the cold anymore. Or you can start to get kind of genetically creative with the case of this Antarctic cod or toothfish, which actually expresses a protein in its blood that functions as an antifreeze. And so it'll stay in the cold, but won't be affected by it. And so these are all very interesting and fun stories worthy of their own telling. But the one I want to focus on is, as the title mentioned, the case of this wood frog known as Rana sylvatica, which is this cute little bugger here. And so this is a video that hopefully is showing through. But what the wood frog does, instead of running away from the cold or hibernating, is it embraces it entirely. So the frog at the beginning of this video, completely frozen. You can see its translucent eye, but in a number of hours, it actually starts to thaw. It'll start to twitch. You can see it now blinking, and eventually will be sound as a pound, totally normal, and jump out of its little burrow and be very happy. And the question becomes actually, why is it that this animal can go to a state of complete frozenness and come back and survive? Whereas, if you and I freeze, we quite literally, unfortunately, freeze to death. And so the answer to this frog's conundrum is twofold. So it does two things. One is that it starts flushing water from its blood into its abdomen. So it takes it out of the blood, and eventually the water will kind of freeze as a sheet in that cavity. So it kind of puts its organs on ice to help preserve them. And secondly, it'll start dumping so much glucose into its blood. And so combining these two has the effect of not only having less water in the bloodstream, but also more sugar in the bloodstream. So taken together, what you're doing, or I suppose what the frog is doing, is increasing its sugar to water ratio essentially 100-fold. So it has a huge spike in its blood sugar amount. Okay, cool, but what does this actually have to do with freezing? So this calls up this phenomena in chemistry known as freezing point depression. And freezing point depression is the idea that if you have water or some kind of solvent and you put in the case of this graph salt, some kind of solute, it will actually decrease the freezing point at which the entire solution freezes. So the more salt, or in the case of the frog, the more sugar you put into your bloodstream, the colder it really has to be for your bloodstream to start forming ice crystals. Because the danger of freezing is that you create these ice crystals that are going to damage your cells, ruining their function and essentially killing the organism. But if you have enough sugar, you're more resistant to freezing. In the case of the frog, it'll actually also start to express particular clotting proteins so that in case there is a little bit of damage, it can fix it really fast. So this leads me, I think this case is really interesting, and it leads me to this really fun but very controversial and speculative theory, which is the idea that if you try to translate this to human health, if you think of high blood sugar, you tend to think of diabetics, because that's a very big part of that, of being diabetic, is that high blood sugar. And if you look at a prevalence of type 1 diabetes, which is the juvenile onset that usually has a very big genetic component, you'll actually see that there's a very large spike of it in Northern Europe. So what this coincides with, quite interestingly, is this event known as Younger Dryas. So Younger Dryas was a sudden ice age, I promise this is related, a sudden ice age that happened 13,000 years ago, and that particularly strongly affected Northern Europe here, as highlighted in purple. And the idea is that because the onset of this ice age was so strong, those with a genetic predisposition to having higher glucose concentrations in their blood sugar were more resistant to any danger caused by freezing, because for the same reasons that I presented for the frog. So because of that, genes for diabetic-like conditions were enriched in this population and remain enriched in this population today. This is still, it's a relatively controversial theory, but it kind of lines up with other things observed in labs. So rats can actually have a condition of cold onset diabetes, where if you expose them to cold, they spike their glucose and their blood sugar. Diabetics tend to be diagnosed more often in colder seasons, and things like that. So hopefully I gave you all something fun to think about with winter approaching. And with that, I'll leave room for the next speaker.
Thank you. That was pretty mind-blowing. I think the chat agrees. Next up, we're going to have Raheem. I'm not quite sure how to link these two presentations, but his is about the command line. So take it away.
Hello, guys. So I'm going to be presenting about the command line, or in other words, how to control your computer without having to move your mouse, so you can like command the computer directly. So if I share my screen here, here we go. Okay. So can you guys see the presentation? Okay, super. So yes, our computers are basically robots, and we can control them how we want, and usually do this through like a graphical interface, like you click on buttons or you type something. You can like move things around, but now I'm going to show you how you can like directly talk to your computer. And we're going to start from the basics, and I hope this can be a hands-on course. So I want all of you guys to follow along. So the first step, of course, is to open the command line. So the command line is basically where you can write these commands. It's like basically the entrance to the computer. Like the computer starts listening to you after you open the command line. So in Windows, it's really easy to open the command line on both Windows and Mac. So for Windows, you just need to go to the bottom left and type command prompt. And for Mac, it's on the top right and you type terminal. So if you guys want to follow along, if you can open the command line, so then we can go through these commands that I'm going to teach together. Okay, so when you guys have gotten it open, does anyone want to like react when you guys have it open? Anyone have any like questions that did not work? Okay, I'm getting some thumbs up here. That's good. So I'm going to move on First, we're going to begin with navigating. So basically, in the command line, you are at a location in your computer, and it's part of the file system, like the location in the file system. So if we look at this diagram here, you can be in the folder Tom, and then you have access to all the files and folders in that folder that you're in, and then you need to move around. For example, can you guys see my mouse? Perfect. So let's say you're in Tom, but you actually want to look at this file 1.txt here. You need to move to this folder data to be able to access 1.txt. So now we're going to go to the commands of how to be able to move around in the system to be able to like interact with the files that you want to do stuff with. So in order to like see where you are and see the files around you, you use this command called ls on Mac or a command called dir on Windows. So commands are case sensitive, so it's important to make sure that all the letters are like lowercase. So let's try it out now. Here we go. So I just opened my command prompt here. And I'm on Windows, I'm going to write dir, and then it shows me all the files. So here we can see that I have a file here called file1, and then there's a folder called folder1. So I can access this file here, and if I want, I can go deeper into my file system and enter folder1. So let's see how you do that. So to enter, to move around, you can use the command cd on both Windows and Mac and write the folder name. Let's do that first. So we see that there's a folder called folder1 here. And if we write cd folder1, then we move into folder1. But how do we know where we are at the current moment? That's where the prompt comes in here, where you can see that I am currently in this folder relative to my entire computer. So I'm in the folder users, then this folder, and then in folder1. And finally, to move to the preceding folder, to move back, you write cd space and then 2 dots. Let's try that here. Cd ... like this. So now I'm back into C4, the folder C4. Okay, so now that we can like move around and get to the files that we want, what kind of cool things can we do with these files? So the command line is really complicated, and there's definitely like, I'm only not even scratching the surface at this point, but I just want to show you guys how you can do stuff without having to click around File Explorer. So the first thing I'm going to begin with is how you are going to make new files, view files, delete ones, or make folders. So these are the commands that I'm going to use here. So let's say you want to see what's inside the file. This can be done with the commands cat or type. So I already have a file in my folder, as we saw. Here we go. So dir to check, to look around, and I see that, oh, there's a file1 here. Let's see what's inside it. So then I can use the command type in file1. Let me see that the file includes command line is cool. Okay. So let's say I want to make a new file this time, and this can be done with the command echo, then the data that you want to put into the file, and then the file name, separated by a greater than sign. So these spaces are really important, and also case sensitivity is also like true for the file names as well. So be careful. So let's try it out then. I can make a new file with, for example, splash is cool, and we can call it file2.txt. If I run this, and then I look around me again, I look what's inside my folder, I see that we have file2.txt here, and I can view it with type again, file2.txt. Here we go, splash is cool, perfect. So of course, after making all of these files, you know, your memory might be running low, so you also need to learn how to delete files as well. And this can be done with rm or del, and then the file name afterwards. So again, we have this file2 here that we just made. If we want to remove it again, just use del file2.txt. Run it, and then we check around this again, it's gone. So these are really basic commands, but they let you, I'll now start showing some more complex stuff that you guys can do. But before then, I just need to demonstrate making a new folder, which is very important if you want to organize everything. So if we can make a new folder called folder2, and then as usual, again, we can use cd to go into this folder, folder2, like that. And the prompt tells us that we're currently in folder2. All right, okay. How is everyone following along? Are you guys able to replicate the commands? Okay, super. So time to move on to some more useful stuff. Comparing files is really easy with the command line. For example, if you have two files and some lines are different and you want to find out what's different between them, you can use the command diff or fc. This is better than, for example, opening the file in like Notepad and trying to find all the small differences. So let's show how that looks. Oh, sorry. Okay. There we go. So I'm going to go back into the C4 folder with cd ... and remind myself of what's inside this folder. And we have one file. And let's say we make another one, again, with echo. For example, Linux is cool. And then we use the greater than sign and file2. Here we go. We use 0 again, and we see that we've made this file2 now. So if we want to see what's the difference between file1 and file2, we can run fc and then the two names of both files. So file1, file2. And what fc and diff does is that they for each line that's different in the file, they show you, they list that line. So that means that you can easily see the small differences in your two files. Here we go. So here it's detected that these two lines are different, so it showed both of them. We can also try to make another file that's the same as one of the ones that we already have and see how it looks then. Continue making own files and experimenting as well. So let's see. Let's try command line is cool again. File3. And then we do fc file1. There we go. So now it says that there's no differences encountered. So this is, of course, a very simple case, but if you have complex, more complex files, it can be a bit more useful. Now I'm going to move on to how you can find files. So if you're in a folder with many different files and you want to see where everything is, you can use find. There's a small difference here between Mac and Windows, where for Mac you need to like have a space and then a dot, like a full stop and then a space and then the file name, while you put the full stop at the end for Windows. So let's try it out. Let's say I want to find all the files. Okay, let's make a new file inside one of our folders. So I already forgot how our file structure looks. So I'm going to use dir. We see we have folder 1. So we go into this folder 1 here, this, and then we make a new file like you can't find me or something like that. And we can call it hidden file. Here we go. So now we have a hidden file here. So if we go back into C4, we can try to see if we can find this file. So if we know this file is named like hidden file, then we can try to look for it by using the command find and then the file name. So find hidden file, then dot. Ooh, okay, I did something wrong. Interesting. Okay, it didn't work, but yes, find is a command that you can use. Moving on, like when you're writing commands, it might feel like tedious to write the same commands all over again. If a command doesn't work, you might want to change it slightly without having to write it again. So you can access like previous commands by pressing up, and you can autocomplete commands by pressing tab. So that's a demonstration of this. If I want to view a file, for example, let's just see what's here. There again, we see that there's file 3. So if I want to open file 1, for example, I can be like type file, and if I press tab now, it will just automatically complete it for me, so I can save lots of time instead of having to write stuff. And I can even access files in folders in front of me if I included like before the name of the file I want to include. So we have our hidden file inside folder 1. So to access that, we can write folder 1 / file 1. Wait, that's wrong. Wait. Okay. Done. Okay. Doesn't work for some reason. Wait, let's see. Okay. Oh, but you should. Sorry. Yeah, but yeah, you can autocomplete with tab, and then you can access previous files by doing up. So I just ran dir, for example, so I can like press up to like see the commands I ran before, and that lets me like not have to write things all over again. Finally, you can also open programs, for example, MS Paint in the command line. So this is useful, so you don't need to go and find your programs. If you know what the command is, you can just write it, and then it will automatically open it for you. There we go. So I hope this gave you guys a short introduction into the command line. Some of the things didn't work. I am a Linux person, as I state here. So Linux is a bit different from Windows, but I did Windows because of Room. So Linux and Windows are a bit different, as you saw with the differences between Mac and Windows. And I would recommend that if you guys want to really play around more with the command line, that you should get Linux and learn the scripting language Bash. And I put some resources here. And if you even want to go beyond that, you can use Python to do a lot of cool stuff. There's this book called Automate the Boring Stuff with Python, and it's a great resource for being able to control your computer and automate a bunch of stuff using code. So I hope you guys liked the class. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So if you haven't learned to command the command line yet, I just wanted to remind everyone this will be going up on our YouTube next week, which I'll send in the chat. But until then, we'll pass it over to Ben, who's going to be talking about black holes, physics, everything.
Everything and more, yes. But first, I wanted to share my favorite command line tool. If you have a Linux system, or you can also do it on Mac if you install it, which is cowsay. You can have cowsay Splash is cool, and it will display a nice ASCII art of Splash is cool. So for all those who love ASCII art, this is pretty great. So let me now switch to the main presentation. So today I'm going to be talking about black holes, general relativity, and quantum mechanics. And black holes are very cool objects that have kind of captured the public attention as well as physicist attention for quite some time. With physics, the game is always about trying to find kind of extreme objects that push the boundary in some way. And what's really great about black holes is they push the boundary in two kind of very different ways and end up stretching to the kind of existing paradigm in two different ways. So black holes are extremely massive. And normally when we think about things that are really, really have a lot of mass or really heavy, we think about general relativity. This is the techniques that we've used to study how stars move, how galaxies move. But they also are very small. And when we think about really small things in physics, we usually kind of think about it in terms of quantum mechanics. These are the rules that dictate how atoms behave, how chemical reactions occur. And so when we try to combine these two things together, we get some interesting results and currently some not well understood physical processes in these regimes. So the first kind of question is, what is a black hole? And there's a lot of different kind of mathematical tools you could use to try and describe what exactly a black hole is in terms of what it means for how space-time is curved. But the most basic level, what a black hole is it's a region of space where the escape velocity is greater than the speed of light. And so what the escape velocity is on Earth, it's roughly 11.2 kilometers per second. This is the speed you essentially have to launch a spacecraft for it to leave Earth's orbit. This is why when you jump up, you can't jump out of Earth because you probably don't jump at 11.2 kilometers per second. Normally people jump at about 1 meter a second. So a few orders of magnitude off from being able to escape Earth's orbit. But if you have a big rocket with lots of engines, you can do it. And the mathematics of this, to kind of put down a formula, because of course I'm a physicist, so I have to include some formulas, is it comes out from when you want to set the kinetic energy. So this is the energy an object has due to its speed. If you set it equal to the gravitational energy, essentially you want to have enough energy to escape the gravity of Earth. And so you can rearrange this formula with some simple algebra to get this escape velocity. So if you give me the mass of a given object and the radius of that object, so in the case of the Earth, you have the radius of the Earth and the mass of the Earth, you can use that to calculate the escape velocity if you know this constant g, which just comes from basically experimental determination of what g is. So what we want to now do is we want to set this escape velocity equal to the speed of light, and then figure out what radius you have to compress a large mass to get one of these black hole objects. So you can, again, just rearrange the formula. Normally for physicists, we talk about the speed of light as c. This is the c and e equals mc squared, everybody's favorite formula, at least it's my favorite formula. And you end up with this equation for what's known as the Schwarzschild radius. So this is, again, the radius you have to compress an object for it to become a black hole. So, so here I just wrote down words, and this radius defines what's known as the event horizon. So this is the boundary where, as you're falling into the black hole, if you pass this event horizon, suddenly the velocity you need to escape will exceed the speed of light. And because nothing can exceed the speed of light, you're doomed to fall into the black hole. And to kind of give you an idea, if you want to take the Earth, say, and you want to make a black hole out of the Earth, if you're being really mean, and you don't want us to live in a nice habitable planet, and want us to get sucked into a black hole, you have to compress the entire Earth to about the size of a marble. That's like roughly a 1/4 inch is the Schwarzschild radius of the Earth. If you want to take yourself and turn yourself into a black hole, you have to compress your body to about the size of an atomic nuclei. So this, of course, takes incredible amounts of energy. As you start trying to compress an object to these really, really small scales, different physics comes into play to exert a force to stop you from continually pressing things down. But if you have a very massive star that no longer is fusing, no longer has chemical reactions and nuclear reactions inside of it that keep it supported, eventually just the gravity alone can compress it all the way to become a black hole. So now we want to talk about this in terms of general relativity. So the simplest idea for general relativity, you could take many, many years of courses all about general relativity, but basically the simplest idea is the amount of stuff in space changes how the space-time is curved. And what curvature of space-time means is more or less kind of how distance is measured. If you have a ruler out in space and you put a lot of stuff in the way, you put a massive star in, the length of that ruler will change. And kind of when you go through the math of how you're changing how distance is measured, things like gravity kind of pop up. and it becomes very natural. And one of the key principles of general relativity that comes into play when we're talking about black holes is what's known as the equivalence principle. So the equivalence principle states that the local effects of motion under gravity are indistinguishable from those of an accelerating observer in a flat spacetime. A flat spacetime being one that doesn't have any large gravitational forces in it. So to kind of go a little bit more detail into that, if we have an experiment, let's say we're dropping a ball, and we do it on Earth, which has the force of gravity, the behavior of this ball, how the ball moves, will be exactly the same as if I'm instead in a rocket ship out in the middle of deep space, and I'm accelerating the rocket ship to the right number. So the acceleration on Earth's surface is 9.8 meters per second cubed. So if I'm basically in a big rocket ship, I power on my thruster, I accelerate to the same pace, the ball will behave the exact same way. So this is called the equivalence principle, and it becomes very fundamental in understanding general relativity. And as far as we've tested so far, this seems to hold up to an extremely high degree. If you find some case where this doesn't happen, you'd probably instantly get a Nobel Prize in physics, because it'd be such a fundamental shift in how we understand physics. But so far, everybody's found that it's about the same. So now we want to talk about quantum mechanics. This is the other extreme. This is the physics of really small things. And the basic idea of quantum mechanics is that every object is described by something known as a wave function. So normally in classical mechanics, if we have a ball, just like the ball on the last page, we talk about it in terms of its position in space and its velocity. So how fast it's moving and in what direction. But in quantum mechanics, there's some more information about this object that's out there. There's all this information encapsulated in this wave function. And the laws of physics are actually applied to the wave function. And that's how the system evolves in time. So this ball that's falling, it's actually its wave function that's changing. But we as observers looking at things only see a small piece of that wave function. So in the case of the ball, all we see is its position and its velocity. So there are a couple of key ideas that come up in quantum mechanics that'll be relevant. So the key idea, number one, is unitarity. This is a kind of mathematical term, but essentially it means that if we kind of could see all the wave functions in the universe at once, we were some magical being that could do this, we could predict all future events and all past events. Basically, we could become an all-knowing God who could predict infinitely far in the future and infinitely far in the past, assuming we knew everything at the present day. Nothing just pops up and nothing disappears. A second idea, which ends up being a bit more technical, is what's known as the no-clone theorem, which is basically if I have if I have this ball, I can't make a complete copy of its wave function. I cannot duplicate it in any way. Even if I had like an infinite amount of energy I could throw at it, I can't make a copy of one of these quantum wave functions. So the idea of unitarity actually goes much further back. Here's another picture of an old dead dude. I remember the first talk had one of a philosopher. Here's another kind of famous mathematician and philosopher, Laplace. He came up with this idea called the Laplace's demon, which was one of these little evil beings. And he theorized that if you had knew the positions of all particles in the universe and their velocities, shown here in the red lines, you could predict things, again, infinitely far in the future. You could predict how the universe will end, how it would begin, predict how everybody would move around, and that would be really cool. Since Laplace was around, though, things like quantum mechanics made that a bit more complicated because we have these wave functions, which we can't directly observe, unlike unlike a ball's position and its velocities. You can't see all the wave function, but mathematically it still behaves more or less the same way. All these wave functions you can predict far in the future. The no clone theorem, again, it kind of gets a bit more technical. To actually kind of show it out, I have to kind of show a lot more of the math of quantum mechanics, which I couldn't do in 6 minutes. But one of the main kind of issues that comes up with the no clone theorem is if you could clone one of these quantum wave functions. So if I have, say, an electron and I want to study its whole wave function, if we could just make infinite copies of that electron, I could explore the whole wave function, which ends up breaking a lot of fundamental things in quantum mechanics, because you're never supposed to be able to see the whole wave function as an observer. But so now we want to take all these techniques and apply them to a black hole. So the kind of mental puzzle a lot of physicists try to solve is the idea of what happens if we're falling towards a black hole? What happens to our body? What happens to kind of the content of our body and how it can predict what's going in the future in the universe and what's happened in the universe? So there are kind of three main options for falling into a black hole. Again, I do not recommend anybody falls into a black hole, but I need to put that disclaimer. So option one is you fall past the event horizon entirely. So remember, this event horizon is this boundary of no escape. Once you fall past the event horizon, you can never escape the black hole. Not only can't your body escape the black hole, but any kind of information about what you're doing can't escape. Because in order for any information to escape, you have to send out, a light signal saying, hey, I'm past the event horizon. But you can't do that because that light couldn't ever escape the black hole. So the option number two is you fall towards the event horizon, but you never quite pass the event horizon. Meaning that something weird is happening at this boundary. There'll probably be really strong gravitational forces, but there shouldn't, according to general relativity at least, there shouldn't be anything that happens at the event horizon. You should be able to pass through it, no problem. But maybe for whatever reason, you can't. So that's you fall towards the event horizon, but never quite pass it. And then the third option, which is a little bit more of a weird option, or maybe a combination of the past two, is you both fall into the black hole, so you fall past the event horizon, but something about your body stays on the outside of the black hole. So now we're going to go through these three options and why each one has an issue. So the first problem, you fall past the event horizon entirely, has an issue, which is that it violates unitarity. So the idea being that, let's say I fall into the black hole, so now I'm past the event horizon. Now there's some future cosmologist out there that's studying all these wave functions throughout the universe. Suddenly, now that my body fell into the black hole, there's no information anywhere in the universe about what happened to me because I fell into the black hole. There's none of me left. And so this kind of means that if this theoretical future cosmologist tried to rewind the clock backwards, he wouldn't be able to recreate me in any way because all of my body's lost. It's not like it got distributed across the universe and you could reconstruct it later on. It all went into the black hole. So this violates this principle of unitarity because we can no longer evolve things forward and backwards how we would want to. So the next issue, if we fall towards the black hole but never quite pass it, is that it violates the equivalence principle. Remember, the equivalence principle says that that any experiment you do in a gravitational frame, in a gravitational area, so if you're on the surface of the Earth, should be the same as if you're in an accelerating frame. And so the event horizon is just a gravitational place. The only force you feel is gravity. So nothing special should happen at the event horizon other than just the force of gravity, which is just like getting accelerated. And you're not getting accelerated necessarily to some crazy extent when you're going past the event horizon. So this violates the equivalence principle because according to the equivalence principle, you should just pass through the event horizon as though it's not an actual boundary. And so the final option is you fall into the black hole, but you also stay outside the black hole. This way you could still, get around the equivalence principle because you're still falling into the black hole. You get around unitarity because some of you still stays outside the black hole, so there's still that information around. So this kind of seems like maybe one of the ways out of this paradox, if you kind of can do both at once. But sadly, this violates the third thing I mentioned, the no cloning theorem. So we're kind of stuck because you can't fall into it, you can't stay outside of it, and you can't do both at the same time. So maybe one way to get out of this paradox is black holes don't exist. Sadly, this doesn't seem to be true. We've found pretty strong evidence of black holes from a lot of different ways. Just in the past 5 years or so, we've found gravitational waves from merging black holes. And we've also found pictures of the outside of black holes. So this is a picture of a nearby supermassive black hole at the center of a nearby galaxy. And that's, I guess, the black hole around the center. And around here is some radio emission from nearby the black hole. So not yet past the event horizon, still far outside of it. But there's a lot of hot gas there, and we can kind of see it swirling into this black hole in the center. So sadly, I don't actually have a solution to this paradox. If I did, I would have, again, a Nobel Prize probably for solving this great paradox. But hopefully maybe one of you guys in your future can figure out a solution and make physicists happy worldwide.
All right, thank you, thank you. I think everyone has some ideas. If we have any, future Nobel Prize winners in the audience, now's the time to start young. But instead of falling into black holes, I think Will is our next speaker, and he's going to teach us to be very aware of our location. So let's learn from Will.
Right. We able to see my screen share here? Okay, perfect. So sticking with the theme of the stars, we are going to be navigating with the sun. I assume most of you, have heard of a compass, and maybe some of you even know how to navigate with stars, right? But has anybody ever taught you how to use the sun to navigate? We're going to do that today, and I'm going to show 2 methods. First method is the watch method. So there are 3 key steps to doing this. First thing you do, take your watch, assuming you have one. You're going to point the hour hand on the watch face in the direction of the sun. Then you have your 12 o'clock mark, right? Everybody's familiar. Halfway between of that is going to be south. And from that, you can get a north-south line. Basically, you get there because the sun rises in the east, that's in the west, so you can set up a mapping, in a sense, and derive directions from that. 2 things to note on this method. First thing, if you're on daylight savings time, you're going to have to use your 1 o'clock mark instead of the 12 because of the time shift. The other thing to note is that this only works in the Northern Hemisphere. This direction set is written for people in America. If you are not in America and you're in the Southern Hemisphere, you do the opposite because you're on the opposite side of the world. All right, so that is our first method. The second method we are going to look at today is called the Shadowstick Method, and it works in a very similar way. There are a couple of steps here. The first step you're going to do is put a stick in the ground, pointing at the sun, right? And you mark that with a rock. Then basically you're going to wait 15 minutes and figure out where the shadow moves. And kind of from that, you can kind of continue to extrapolate your east-west line, right? And you're going to draw that line out. Then directly perpendicular to that, you can draw north-south, and then you've just made yourself a compass, right? And it works in basically the same principle. Sun rises in the east, sets in the west, so the direction of the shadow goes west to east, and you can set up directions from them. So this, obviously, neither of these methods really particularly useful for day-to-day navigation, but can come in handy if you're stuck and you need to figure out where you are. So that's the 2 methods I have for you today. Shorter presentation, so I'll pause there and hand it back to Corey.
Thank you, Will. Will hopefully come in handy hopefully we're not in a situation where we have to use this, but now we know. So last but not least, we have Emmy. I think we're going to end on a positive note tonight, and she'll be talking about how we can activate joy.
Awesome. Hi, everyone. Hello, hello. I definitely enjoyed all of your presentations. Thank you. Especially like a good theme like the sun and now joy. It's very similar. just a little bit of a different perspective, because now we're going to learn how to embody the sunshine and actually be the sun in human form by activating joy. So thank you for sticking around. If you want to keep your cameras on, that'd be awesome, because I actually do not have slides today. So it's going to be very nice and personal. So if we can see each other, that'd be amazing. Anyways, activating joy. So just tune into this vibration of the word joy. When we say joy, how do you feel? Say joy. And now say joy with the energy of joy. And the energy of joy is happiness and excitement and fun. So say joy, joy, joy. Yes, beautiful. So I'm here to share that we can act. Yes, oh my gosh, I love it. And you can definitely participate in the comments as well, because that's super fun. Yes, joy. Beautiful. We're here to be the sunshine and share the joy and to choose joy. So I'd like you all to know that joy is a choice. We can choose joy in any moment. Doesn't matter what the external circumstances are, we can choose joy because it's within us. It's within our hearts. Joy and love and gratitude, this is within us, and we can choose it now. And today I'm actually going to lead a little practice for you so that you can activate this joy in any moment. But first, I just wanted to introduce joy. So first, know that you can choose joy. Second, I invite you to fill up your joy cup. So what brings you joy? And that could be different for everyone. Like for some people, basically everything that you were sharing today, that brings you joy. Otherwise, you wouldn't be teaching it. So focus on that. For me, I just love, I love singing. I love dancing. I love walking in nature. I love creating. I love speaking. That all brings me lots of joy. And so I focus on that. So I'll probably have like a little dance party in the living room after this to really just continue on and amplify this joy. So really fill up your joy cup. Prioritize your joy, because then we can overflow with joy, and we're overflowing with such good energy that every person who's in our field will be impacted by this energy, and it can ripple. This can ripple, and we can create this beautiful joy new paradigm. So the third way, kind of like a little introduction, is very simple. To activate joy, it's as simple as smiling and laughing. Smiling and laughing, because when you smile and when you laugh, you are in joy. That is joy. Your smile and your laughter is joy. So to truly embody the joy and to be the sunshine in human form, just smile as you're walking by. Smile when you see someone, instead of putting your head down and just walking past or being on your phone. No, give that person a smile. That is a gift, an offering. And laugh. When you're with your friends, laugh. Or honestly, we can just laugh without any reason, which goes to show that we are joy. We don't need a reason to be joyful, because we can access this energy in any moment just through our smile, just through choosing to smile, just through choosing to laugh. So I invite you to just smile and laugh and enjoy your life. Enjoy your life, because it's just so precious. Your life is so precious. So make the most of it and be in joy. So to really activate this joy, besides smiling and laughing, now I'm going to lead a little practice as well. So we have something called joyful sounds. What are the sounds of joy? So when you're in joy, what do you sound like? You probably sound very excited. There are sounds of excitement. So what are some of the sounds of excitement? Well, they are woohoo, woohoo. How many times do you give yourself permission to say woohoo? Woohoo! And yay! Yay, yay, yay! Yes, feel that energy. You know, the thing about joy is that when we are children, it is very natural natural for us to play and to be joyful. We're constantly saying, woohoo, yay! Maybe we're going down the slide and we're like, woohoo! So with joy, to activate joy, it's about accessing our inner child. The child that simply wants to be free and to play and to run around and to dance and to scream, yeah! So I invite you to practice these sounds more. Practice the sound of laughter and smiling and woohoo, yay, yippee. Just have fun. It's about having fun. Even we're really, like, we have these adult bodies, but we're still children at heart. So keep that child alive within you. Keep that child alive. So now we're going to activate joy right now. So why don't you go ahead and stand up, stand up, stand up. It's going to be a pretty short practice just to end off on a really nice high energy note together as we wrap this all up. Because yeah, thanks for being here. I honor you so much. Thank you. Okay, so what we're going to do is, this is the movement. You're going to go up like this. Gosh, I'll go back a little bit. By the way, we're in smiley faces. Activate the joy. So you're going to go up like this with your hands open and then down. Up, down. And now when you do this, so this is kind of like a power pose, right? When you do this, we're going to say yes. So every time you go up, we say yes. And we'll do that 3 times. So I'll just demonstrate and then we'll do it together. It goes like this. Yes! 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 Woo! Amazing. Okay, ready, y'all? Here we go. 1, 2, 3, let's go. Yes! 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 Take it out. Again, one more time. Now, if you are standing up, we're going to take it one more notch. We're actually going to jump because it's about jumping in joy. So now we're going to jump up and say yes. Ready? Yes! 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 Let's do it again. Yes! 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 Now keep going in a circle. Yes! 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 Woo! Now say woo! Yeah! Give me! Yes! 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 Woo! Every single, whatever you just want, that like high energy, simple as yes, 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 and choosing joy, smiling, laughing. Wow, wow. So now we built up all this energy. Let's just take a moment to ground into our bodies, through our breath. You can place hands on your heart. When we place our hands on our heart, we are really feeling the love in our being and the gratitude. So place a hand on your heart, feel your heartbeat, thanking yourself for being here, thanking yourself for choosing to learn from all these incredible people who have so much value to offer us. So thanking everyone who showed up today, feeling that gratitude, feeling that love, and making a commitment to yourself to choose joy, to choose joy, and to share this joy with the people around you so that we can co-create a joy revolution together. Woo, woo, woo! Oh yeah! So let's give ourselves a big hug. Give yourself a big, big, big hug. Feeling the love. And one more big deep breath of gratitude. And then send this energy to each other. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you for being here today. And thank you so much, Firestorm, Rainstorm, for organizing all of this. We truly do appreciate this. So thank you, thank you, thank you. Yay! Amazing. Oh, I'm so, yeah, you're so welcome. Yay, thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Emmy. That was so infectious. I hope everyone is feeling a little bit more joyous. Yes, so that was our last speaker. Thank you, everyone, students, Splash admins, Splash teachers, Rainstorm teachers for joining us tonight. Like I mentioned, you can check out this recorded version on our YouTube channel in a couple of days. And you can also sign up for Rainstorm, which is happening at the end of January. So we appreciate you sticking around a little bit longer tonight. And we'll see you at the next one, which is January 5th. So the first Wednesday of January. And stay tuned on your email and in the student Discord to see more announcements from us.